for the reasons already alluded by Dahiru, they pointed that there should be alternatives, and in fact, there are ongoing alternatives to ensure the publicity of the proceedings, the visibility of these proceedings, the accessibility of these proceedings to the victims and affected communities. In the case locations, 8 of them, I believe in the responses, Dahiru or Leonie could mention them again just for our recollection, that the outreach, the public information and outreach section, the registry as an organ should do everything within its powers, within its capacity to make these proceedings accessible, meaningful, relevant, and closer to the communities. So in the absence of the court coming to Uganda, either in Gulu or Lira, as was the request, we have the responsibility to make sure these proceedings are followed by the victims and affected communities and stakeholders and the media, civil society. And we have put together already an elaborate strategy to do just so, what the judges have asked us. One of which is live broadcast of the proceedings. And this was also clearly mentioned in the decision that it could be one alternative to bring the proceedings closer. Live broadcast using the services of NTV or one of the local, the national televisions to broadcast these proceedings live for the nation to follow them, to make these proceedings accessible within the victims' communities through live streaming. And we have successful stories of having done that in the trial of Dominic Ongwen. So we are just going to fine-tune some of the nuances on how best we can do it, especially in the new locations related to the case of Joseph Kony. We would have media engagement here in Kampala, in Gulu. We are going to have public mass outreaches. At this time, we don't know the duration of the confirmation of charges hearing, whether it is 1 week, it is 3 days, but our strategy is such that we have provided for the maximum for 5 days. If it's less than that, we still have the capacity to publicize the proceedings in Kampala, nationally, in all the 8 case locations linked to the case of Joseph Kony, and the affected communities, all of northern Uganda in general. Because as Leonie and Dairu mentioned to you the last time, apart from this 8 case locations, there are broader thematic crimes covering all of northern Uganda, and we have a responsibility to make these proceedings accessible to persons who are located in those areas. We would have live radio broadcast. Already we have contracted the services of 4 radio stations based in Gulu, in Lira, and in Soroti to ensure that they publicize live the proceedings on the days that the hearing would take place. And we would have live radio programs in person in all the studios to not only provide the live update, but to explain the summary of each day that the processes occur, what are the key highlights. And we will be sharing with you the links of everything that is going to happen. As long as it remains public, we have a responsibility to make those proceedings public and accessible to you as well. We can discuss in more detail our strategy, but this, in a nutshell, is what we intend doing before, because the strategy is before, and this is part of such engagement, before the hearing, during the hearing, and after the hearing, because after the hearing, the communities, all of you will want to know what is the outcome. And normally it's within 60 days that we expect a decision. So we will be discussing what are the possible outcomes of the decision of a confirmation of charges. We wouldn't know whether the charges will be confirmed, all of them, some of them declined or reversed or amended, but we will be preparing the communities and all of you on those possible outcomes of the confirmation of charges hearing. And when the decision comes out, we don't know when, but if we go by the rules, it's within 60 days. We have a responsibility to publicize the outcome of the hearing, which is the decision. And it's a big package of an information strategy, but we will unpack it as the proceedings or as the processes go along, before, during, and after. We turn now the microphone to you for your questions, for your interventions, and Dahiru Leone, joining us from The Hague, will be more than happy to take your questions, and I'm also here if anything specific to as the proceedings or as the processes go along, before, during, and after. Dahiru is going to address the rest of the other issues on in situ and appearance or none of for witnesses in the confirmation. And I was thanking you for the detailed explanation of the decision of the judges, very legalese, but you've tried to make it a little bit interesting and appreciable. But I believe the guys will come with questions. Let me hand over to Dahiru to discuss the two topics. Yeah. Breaking news, but this is a regular update, even if it has been 6 months since we last met. Precisely.
We had visited northern Uganda in relation to the in situ confirmation of charge hearing. And you may recall back then when we came here, we did try to explain to you what are the values we found in having an in situ hearing taking place in Uganda, and the locations that we were considering back then included Gulu, Lira, and Kampala. So following our return from that visit, the judges have instructed the registry of the court to conduct a feasibility assessment. And you may recall we also did say after our request that the judge would order the registry to do that in order to determine whether it would be possible to conduct an in situ confirmation of charge hearing. Our request was supported back then by the legal representative of the victims, who were of the same view that a confirmation of charge hearing would be beneficial, not only to the victims affected by the crimes allegedly committed by Joseph Kony, but also good for Uganda in terms of transparency of the judicial process, among others. The registry did carry its feasibility assessment and reported to the chamber. And in its reports back then, it did state that it was able to carry that assessment within a relatively limited time frame, meaning the time they had was just enough for them to do what they had to report on. And in their recommendation following that assessment, they did indicate that Gulu was the most feasible options compared to the others. Reason being that it's a city that is close to the victims affected by the crimes, that there are accommodation possibilities there if part of the court was to be transferred in situ, and also because there is, as was evidenced by the Koyolo case that you are all familiar with, there are courtroom structure that could be used by the registry. They ruled out Kampala as being removed from the community, but also Lira, arguing that the accommodation options and courtroom structure would make it more complicated than Gulu. But one other reason they advanced in their report was also budgetary limitation, where they consider that there would be substantial financial implication for the court if it were to carry a confirmation of charge hearing in situ. Following that report, I'm not going to get into the detail of the other submissions that were made after the report was submitted, but just probably it's worth highlighting the decision that the pre-trial chamber took as a result. they rejected the request from the prosecutor to conduct the in situ hearing, arguing that it was not in the interest of justice. But basically, in summary, they took three, I would say, factors into account. The first one is the natural or limited scope of the confirmation of charge hearing. As you may recall, when we were here last time, we did explain what a confirmation of charges hearing is. It is a process whereby the office of the prosecution has to demonstrate that there is sufficient evidence supporting the case for that case to be committed to trial. So for the judges, this limited scope, as opposed to a full-fledged trial where you would actually determine the criminal responsibility of the accused persons, makes it not necessarily, valid for us to conduct in situ hearing, because the number of days that hearing would take place are quite limited, and the evidence that will be adduced is not one that you would actually be dealing with at a trial stage. The other consideration they took into account are security ones. Security for them was an aspect that was important to consider, and what the chambers did say is that the court is actually in a contest in a period where it is subject to several threats. Elected officials are under threats, but also the court's operation are under threat. The court has been the subject of cyber attack in the past, but also those threats make it more challenging for the court, making the court more vulnerable, and therefore if we were to conduct an in situ hearing, the ability of the court, because of that vulnerability to administer justice, would be jeopardized or threatened. The third consideration are budgetary consideration. In so doing, the following one of the arguments put forward by the registry, where they consider that in the current context, where the court is expected to reduce cost and to diligently use its resources and budget, it was not advisable or in the interest of justice to carry that in situ hearing in Uganda. So those were basically the three factors that the judges took into account when deciding on whether to hold the confirmation of charge hearing in Uganda or not.